Another big Friday here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stopping by. Best discussion, debate, and analysis. Leave those comments and questions there in the live chat. We will get to them. Consider the super chat contribution as well. All right, we will take your calls. We left the link there in the chat. Of course, we're at the dawn of week 9 in college football. I thought I was in for a good ball game tonight with Syracuse going to Pitt. The Cuse at 2-1 in the ACC. Pitt came in at 3-0. Check that. They are now 3-0. They were 2-0 entering the game at home. You could see how this Pitt Panther team, undefeated now, 7-0, has just captured the city of Pittsburgh as you looked at all the fans disguised as empty seats in the upper deck. The upper deck was basically empty, maybe about 3% full. But that's Pitt football, and that's Pitt football in the city of professional sports. It is an uphill struggle to gain any kind of attention for Pitt football. But hey, that's the issue of marketing and popularity. But on the field, Pitt wins over Syracuse. Lost track of what the final score was. I saw 41-13 late in the ball game. And again, I was locked and loaded to watch a really good football game. I watched the entirety of the first half into the third quarter and then let it drift away because it obviously was not Kyle McCord's night for sure. 4 interceptions in the first half, 3 pick sixes. Were those his fault? Yes. Were those not his fault? Yes. It was a combination effort right there. It was one of those games where there were so many turnovers and so many scoring plays off of turnovers. 3 in one half. That's crazy. I know it's not a record, but it rarely happens, especially in a major college game, that actually, I know at one point in the game, Syracuse in the first half had, going into the second half after scoring a touchdown to get within 31-6, had 30 minutes of possession time to 9 for Pitt. They had outgained them like 270-80, had run 65 plays to 25. But they were losing by 4 scores as, again, Pitt laying on the defense. And this is one of our topics for this week. Now, I did not get a chance to explore this to the extent that I wanted to. Check out the video we produced. It's the last video produced here at the Voice of College Football. And if you wonder why maybe our content production has been a little bit slow here over the last week, there have been family celebrations that I've been attending. And I just got back home earlier today. No internet today when I got home. So no internet from the time I got home. I was all ramped up, geared up to get to work, but no internet from the time I got home today until just about 2 hours ago. But yeah, so family taking precedence all the time, but especially here over the last week. And if you follow me on X, on Twitter, you know exactly why. So it was one of the happiest occasions that we've had in quite some time, and it was phenomenal. I got to say that. So I will stop gushing about my son and new daughter-in-law, and we will talk some football. But Pitt wins. They go to 7-0, 3-0 in the conference. What I was alluding to is the post that we made on Monday or Tuesday regarding the SEC. And what we're going to do each week is we're going to, as these conference races funnel, meaning there are all sorts of, we're halfway through the season. Basically, we're right at the halfway mark. If you look at conference records, everybody has played exactly half or one less or one more than the halfway mark of the number of conference games that they will play. So the number of possibilities is numerous, of course, the number of scenarios, but we're trying to lay those out. Because I am going to guarantee, as I have the entire offseason, there will be at least one conference that will be complete chaos at the end of the year. There will be at least one. There's the potential for more than that. All 4 have the potential, but we laid out the SEC. We're going to dive into that a little bit tonight, especially since it involves this Pitt team in the ACC possibly winning a championship in the ACC. I said this from the time that these conferences expanded. I said it over and over and over and over. Not only would the fallacy and the tragedy in a sports realm, tragedy, be that there will be teams left out of conference championship games that have just as good of credentials as the teams that make the conference championship games, But there could be, get this, undefeated teams not go to conference championship games. Undefeated teams not go to conference championship games. How is that possible? Well, we will tell you. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. The Amazon link is in the description section of all the videos, including this one. When you shop on Amazon, please use the link that we provide. Same shopping experience. Doesn't cost you a penny. And our buddy Joey's on top of this. Look at that. Shop on Amazon. And I have demonstrated this here and have proven it side by side with friends and family a number of times. Go on your Amazon link, use our Amazon link, and then what does it do? It instantaneously knows that it's you. And it's the same exact shopping experience. You don't lose your shopping history, your credit card information, whatever you've got stored on your Amazon account, you got it. And instead of, let's say, when you spend $1 at Amazon, sending a full $1 to Amazon, you send 3, 4, 5 cents to the Voice of College Football. How about that? All right. Appreciate you doing that. Amazon link in the description section of all the videos. We will get to the comments, questions of the Super Chat variety, so they will stand out. Thank you for those. And we will get to the call-in line. We've got our guy Caden chiming in tonight. Caden, how's it going?
Good evening, Mark. That was one heck of a game.
Sure. Okay.
And I'll turn my camera on just so I can show this clean shade face of mine that I got done.
Looking
and
fine.
Pretty impressive, I do say. Is Pitt not the modern day steel curtain like the 70s or the 90s of the Pittsburgh Steelers? I will say that because this team at Pitt has pretty been impressive.
Well, they're impressive. Their record's impressive. Most of their wins aren't too impressive, but they're getting the job done. I don't want to take anything away from them, but they are beating the likes of Cincinnati by 1 point and Cal by 2 points, and that's how they're generally winning these games. But yeah, they're Pat Narduzzi always fields a pass rush. If you look at the national sack rankings, Pitt is always in the top 5. And when I say always, I mean almost always.
It is so true. And I just looked at the sack leaders in college football right now, and Pitt's at number 4, I believe, at the moment.
Very nice.
But the second thing is Georgia. Did Georgia just wake up against Texas? Because I honestly feel like they just something. I've said this for 2 weeks straight on, not on your show, but on the variety here. Georgia has literally snapped, and they're back to that level where they're like, okay, we need to start dominating teams more on our schedule. We cannot be allowing the most points that we've allowed in 3 years. I feel like that's really snapped into Georgia's mentality at this point since they beat Texas.
I would tend to agree with you, Caden. I think that they have the heart of a champion. They have the pedigree of a champion. Their coach is a champion. And they knew that after they lost 1 game, that it would be difficult for them to lose 2 games and still win the conference and get a top seed. So they kicked it into gear. And they know that they had been questioned. They were a underdog going into that game. And I think that may have given them a little bit more motivation.
No, I think it was just the Mississippi State game and the Alabama game that really made them snap like that. That just said we need to get back to dominating teams the way we did it. Dominate early, finish them off early, get them done. That's the thing that Georgia's done. For example, we went against Clemson, destroyed them. The kickoff game against Oregon, destroyed them. Do I need to list the name of Georgia's victims that suffered a handful of the most unmerciful whipping of a beating that anyone can take from a number 1 defense in the country that has ruled the SEC? Because I can list the name of every team that they've beaten to complete sense. And I'm being honest, Mark.
I hear you.
Now, let me just say this. Yeah, I know we lost to Oregon. Congratulations, Mark. You won over this year against me. So congratulations, Mark Rogers. Ta-da!
Well, first of all, there's nothing you need to concede there. I was just telling you that it was kind of an outrageous pick that Ohio State would win by 7 touchdowns. I didn't say that Ohio State wouldn't win the game, and I'm still saying that Ohio State, in my opinion, is a better team.
And I don't mean to cough like that, Mark, but something was caught in my throat. But I still got 2 big games still left that I could still have my bet on. You know, we could win the Penn State game in Beaver Stadium pretty well. We could still dominate that game, and we could still beat Michigan at home this year. So I still got 2 games left to go.
Well, they've got a few more games than that to go. So Ohio State, hopefully, is not overlooking anybody else. But
no, I guarantee they're pretty much looking at everybody, not just overlooking. Because the only team in college football, in my personal opinion, that overlooks their entire schedule is Georgia. Georgia completely overlooks their schedule. I've said this for 3 years straight, and I don't know if your buddy Pigskin Pete or any of them caught that. But I have said that consistently. Georgia overlooks their opponents like nobody. Literally.
What makes you say that?
For the last 3 years, Georgia has beaten every single team on their schedule. They have said, feed us the rock. Where is the serious competition? Ohio State lost to Georgia. Alabama lost to Georgia. Michigan, TCU. I could go the name list every single team that's beaten Tennessee, Florida, Auburn, Ole Miss, Mississippi State.
Sure.
Like, there are teams on that list that they have beaten consistently and just unmercifully beaten.
Maybe I'm
like
missing
that.
your point. Kate, let me back up and make sure I'm not missing your point. Did you say that Georgia overlooks its opponents?
Did I not say that?
That's what I thought you said. And then you went on to list how they've won all these consecutive games against everybody. So I'm not putting those 2 things together, that they overlook their opponents, but they're beating all of them.
They overlook let me paint this picture for you straight, Mark. Let me paint this picture for you. Okay. Start off 2021. They win the national championship.
Yes.
Okay. They beat Bama. Start the season off against Oregon. Oregon says Georgia is not the same team. You know, they can beat Georgia at home. This is a game that Bo Nix is prepared for because he's a former Auburn quarterback. And he's got a better team with Dan Lanning. Walks into that game thinking they've got it in the bag. What happens at the 4th quarter, at the end of the game? Georgia beats them 49-3.
Okay.
When Clemson comes into Atlanta, they got stomped by Georgia because they overlooked them. And it's consistently stayed that way. People said, Georgia's this not so beatable team. Like this team that can be beaten. And then, just again, Georgia stomps every single opponent on their schedule. And they're just like, who's going to step up? Who's the team that actually can hang on their level of physicality on defense? Because that defense is their only, is the main thing about Georgia that has consistently stayed at Georgia. And I'm just only saying that because I think, honestly, the statistics for Georgia's defense for the last 3 years has proven my point.
Okay. All right.
Because
I got to say that I don't exactly know what your point is, but I'm not disagreeing with anything that you're saying. I'm just not putting together that Georgia overlooks everyone, but they beat everyone. And let's also understand that Alabama has beaten Georgia the last 2 times that they played. And there have been teams that have hung with Georgia. It's not like they have steamrolled everyone. South Carolina
I'm not
hung
just
with them
saying
last year. Auburn hung with them last year. Kentucky hung with them this year.
I understand what you're saying, Mark. here's my concern. I honestly that, and I don't know if this is just me, or is it just the fact that I just think George is that good. But I'm telling you, Mark, the SEC for the next 3 to 5 years, 6, 7 years, is going to be owned by Georgia. Literally, their name. If you see anything else related to the SEC, Georgia's the first team that comes up on that list.
Okay,
Because they're
Georgia's
going to
win 6 or 7 consecutive SEC championships.
No exceptions and no questions.
Okay. Well, Caden,
but I'm going to say this only. There's only one team that can hang on the level of physicality that UGA plays at. That UGA consistently has that dominant streak in there, in that mentality set that they have.
We appreciate your call, Caden. Thank you.
Go
call
Bucks.
Back anytime. You're always welcome, sir.
See you later.
Don't really know the point there, but yes, Georgia's a really good football team. We know that. I'm not going to make predictions for 7 years down the road myself. I would expect if Kirby Smart is still the coach at Georgia in 7 years that they will have a top program. I would think that that's a reasonable projection to make. I think it's pretty reasonable that maybe Ohio State will have a top program in 7 years, and maybe Alabama will. And we could name a few others that maybe have less of a chance or certainty that they will be a top program, but we could probably make a reasonable projection. So very good. All right. Welcome in the Voice of College Football. We got the real MVP on the line here.
Hey, Mark, I didn't realize Georgia was any good. So that caller gave us great insight, Mark.
I just couldn't put together the two statements. Georgia overlooks everyone, and then Georgia beats everyone. And
well,
maybe
they're like
those
the Kansas City
can
Chiefs.
happen. Those two things can happen, but I didn't understand the point, or that we know this, that this is obvious to us that they overlook everyone.
I think there's a kernel of truth in there that they'll overlook your Missouri's, Kentucky's games. But if they're playing at Texas or Alabama or something, they've shown no indication over the last 5 years under Kirby Smart that they don't get up and prepare for those games. So I don't understand what that caller was talking about. But Mark, somebody who needs help right now is Kyle McCord. My goodness, 5 picks against Pitt. I mean, we probably all underestimated Pitt because, they're Pitt and nobody cares about Pitt. Sorry to Pitt wins. I've never seen you before, but welcome. But Kyle McCord is never shown in his entire, from me watching him being this bad ever. So is it just a combination Pitt's better than we thought and Kyle McCord is worse than we thought? Is this just a fluke by Kyle McCord? Is this Pitt's got a really great defense?
Ding, 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 ding. I'll put them in order from least to most. I will say that point number 3 is that Kyle McCord is a gunslinger. So he doesn't throw a ton of interceptions. He threw 6 last year in a Big Ten season. So it's not like he threw a million. He threw 6 interceptions in a Big Ten season. He had 6 coming into this game, but he had attempted more passes than anybody in the country coming into this game. So I will say, yes, he enjoys throwing the football. He is tailor-made for this offense, regardless of what we saw tonight, to just, if there's a guy out there, and there's a few out there that you would want to throw just, okay, we've got an average team and we want to be entertaining, and that can be positive and that could be, as we saw tonight, negative. Let's just sling it 50 or 60 times. He's your guy. He can be your guy there because he's got a great arm and great passing skills. So number 3 on your list, I believe, is correct. That Kyle McCord, on occasion, like a lot of great quarterbacks throughout the NFL history, Eli Manning comes to mind, Brett Favre comes to mind, fall in love with their arm, make bad decisions at times, and they kind of come in streaks, and they have their occasional just awful game. Number 2 would be that Pitt does have a really good defense. Pitt has an excellent pass rush, and this cannot be a coincidence that Pitt is always in the top 5 in the nation in sacks. Pat Narduzzi did wonders at Michigan State. We know he can coach defense. They've been great on defense. Let me back that up. We refrain from using the term great very often. They have a good defense and an opportunistic defense. But number 3 or number 1 on the list, I think, is just a lot of things converged at the same time tonight. It was a bit of a fluke. It was a fluke in that you had an opportunistic Pitt defense that made excellent plays. You had Kyle McCord throwing the ball too many times in harm's way, and you had balls fluttering up in the air, landing in guys' arms that were laying on the ground. Things like that. So, yes, it was a bit of a fluke. Pitt is not intercepting Kyle McCord 5 times if they play next week and winning the game by 4 touchdowns, because Pitt has not shown the ability to beat anyone by 4 touchdowns. So Pitt is a better football team, clearly a better football team. They're a more well-rounded football team. Syracuse is a passing attack. That's what they are. That's what they are. They are the Wake Forest of the last few years with Sam Hartman. They live on the right arm of 1 quarterback and 3 receivers. And if those guys don't show up that night, they have no chance. And that's what we saw tonight.
Yeah, they've got a big game next week against SMU, the Mustangs, by the way, Mark. I mean, I know that's the type of game you love. It's just 2 teams nobody cares about, nobody's going to watch, but has massive consequential stakes and playoff implication stakes.
I do.
So I want to talk about maybe arguably the most consequential game of the week, which happens tomorrow between Boise State and UNLV, the Rebels. These 2 teams will probably end up playing twice in the Mountain West. I believe these are the 2 best teams in the Mountain West tomorrow. But, Mark, there is some buzz going around in some circles that if Boise State goes undefeated, they could be the 4th seed in the playoffs instead of your 12th seed because of their fabulous loss against Oregon and them beating up on UNLV and them being in the best group of 5 conference. Do you think there's a chance that Boise State could be the 4th seed if they win out?
I do believe that. So Boise State at 12-1. I'm not finding the game whenever they play.
Tomorrow. You got to scroll up all the way.
Oh, they're playing a Friday game. That's right. Thank you. Yeah, so there we go. So that's going to be a whole lot of fun tomorrow night. Let's see. That's at 10:30. What are we going to do about our show? Maybe we'll do a pregame. Maybe we'll do it that way. All right, because we got Rutgers and USC after as well, and I don't think we want to show up at 3:00 in the morning for a postgame show. We'll figure that out. So yes, I do believe that there's a possibility there, and I got to admit, I misspoke many times and knew that I was, from a technical standpoint, in giving virtually no chance for a group of 5 conference champion to finish in the top 4 seeds. But with the Big 12 being the Big 12, how many Big 12 fans do we have in the chat tonight? I want to refrain from picking on the Big 12, but it's just not a good conference. And the Big 12 champion could have, 4 losses. We could have a 9-4 Big 12 team. I know Iowa State's undefeated right now, but I'm talking about an upset in the Big 12 championship game, and even a 3-loss Big 12 champion compared to a 1-loss Boise State playing in a good Mountain West Conference and then posting the game that you are referring to against Oregon. That would be a very interesting test for the committee to see how they weigh a Power 5 resume and a Group of 5 resume with a decidedly better record.
Yes, and for every G5 fan out there, which maybe one person in this chat, Mark, but we did have a cataclysmic upset yesterday in G5 football. The Kennesaw State Owls got their first win over undefeated Liberty. So we can all stop pretending Liberty is ever a good football team. I mean, Mark, they're a complete joke of a football team. They're probably the 70th or 80th best team, but they play literally in the worst conference maybe ever in the history of college football. I mean, my goodness, it's a bunch of terrible teams outside of them, Western Kentucky and Jacksonville State. Just nobody's good in that league.
Well, goes back to the discussions that we've had in the past and will in the future, I'm sure, concerning these group of 5 teams like a Liberty, like a James Madison, that, yeah, it's a good story. It's nice that they put together a football program and they're able to beat a lot of bad football teams. But they should not be there's this coronation process of when a team like that gets to about, and it's this strange threshold that I've never really been able to put my finger on by the AP poll, that they could be like 7-0. They're not ranked. And then it's a magical win over Louisiana Monroe, 26-23, that pushes them into, they need to be recognized now. They're 8-0. And so we've seen this in the past, and these teams are not top 25 teams. And yes, I was, that game was last night. I was just tied up with, and when I say tied up, enjoying my day away from football, away from my business, and with family and friends all day until late night. And I saw that score. I looked at the stats. I looked at the highlights, and Kennesaw State wins as a 27-point dog in that one.
Yeah, another one of your double-digit underdogs. I don't know if you track them that deep in the G5.
Yeah, I'm not tracking past the Power 5.
I feel like 27.5, though, deserves a little bit of love. Probably the biggest upset of the season if you go by point spread.
NIU 29.
Oh, okay, 29. I figured that would be close.
Yep.
Shout out to Notre Dame, man. They might lose this week to a service academy. You know how lovely it'd be? And I was talking to John when you were out about this, but somebody needs to explain to me why an 11-1 Notre Dame is just waltzing into the playoff as if they deserved anything or earned anything other than their brand name being Notre Dame and being relevant 35 years ago, Mark. What have they done this season to do it? They beat Texas A&M. Woohoo! I mean, Louisville, USC, Navy, Army, and then you go to what? Georgia Tech, and then a bunch of crap after that. I mean, their schedule is horrendous, Mark. Horrendous. It's a glorified group of 5 schedule this year is what they're playing. So why should I treat them like a Power 4 team when they're not playing a Power 4 quality schedule?
We had this conversation with our guy, Brian Driscoll, a couple of weeks ago, because he was arguing more for intent. And I will credit intent in scheduling. So, for example, a few years ago, Michigan played Washington. Before Michigan played those 2 or 3 years of playing nobody in non-conference play, they played Washington. Well, Washington turned out to be horrible. They were 4-8. They couldn't score 10 points a game. They were terrible. But Michigan gave the intent of playing somebody good, but the intent did not manifest itself. Therefore, they played a horrible team. And so the schedule, regardless of the intent, the schedule needs to be judged and evaluated based on reality, not intent. And Notre Dame, the Notre Dame schedules started to go downhill. Notre Dame used to schedule as difficult a schedule as anybody in the country every year. And so you could take any 10-year block of time and say Notre Dame had the toughest schedule in college football or very close to it because they were playing those ACC teams now were Big Ten teams years ago. Of course, they were playing Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue. They've lost those games. They've replaced them. And so Duke, Georgia Tech, Virginia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there are very few Florida States. And now we're seeing Florida State only had a 2-year run at this point. We'll see if they can regroup. And Clemson's really the only constant in that conference. Is that Notre Dame's scheduling has declined considerably since forging this contract with the ACC that is just it's inane and stupid. There's no reason for them to be playing 5 ACC teams. They're not part of the ACC. And so this is what it produces.
Yeah, a lot of crap. And you can tell, like, it's just fun going to, like, Irish places and saying, oh, we went out, we're guaranteed, they're acting like they're just guaranteed to make the playoffs.
Well,
Look at that schedule, Mark.
They might be.
Yeah, well, they shouldn't be. If it is, I will advocate on this show for the SEC to go to 7 conference games. I'm not joking. I will. Look at that schedule.
Okay. Best win, obviously, you mentioned Texas A&M. So Notre Dame fans are rooting so hard for Texas A&M on Saturday against LSU and to complete a very strong season, in which you got to think, I have not looked at the point spreads, Texas A&M 3 or 4 point favorite, 3.5, something like that against LSU. And they should be a favorite throughout the rest of the season, except for the final game against Texas. So let's say
even,
if Texas A&M goes 10-2.
It's even, by the way, right now.
Oh,
Texas
it's even.
A&M.
Okay. I looked earlier. They were opened as a 3 or 4 point favorite. Okay. Anyway, the other games that they play, they certainly can lose, but they'll be a favorite. They play a lot of, I don't remember the teams exactly, South Carolinas of the world. They
play Texas at the end of the year.
Well, I just mentioned that game. Yeah, as being one that they will be the underdog. But so anyway, 10-2, 9-3 for Texas A&M. And that's going to be the game that they're going to hang their hats on, because otherwise, yeah, USC has really let them down. USC has run into the Big Ten this year. And I got to say, all these Maryland and Minnesota games that USC fans discarded during the offseason as being just games that they were just going to run over has not turned out to be the case. So, yes, Notre Dame is not going to have a second win because Louisville's turning out to not be a good team.
Yeah, and what's sad is Louisville's still probably the second best win on that schedule. And for the committee, if they take injuries and stuff to account, Georgia Tech did not have their quarterback against their winning for Notre Dame.
Good point.
And these type of things can matter because Georgia Tech, I would argue, is probably their third best overall win, but without their quarterback and with just some guy that I've never heard of before, I don't know how to evaluate that game.
Zach Pyron.
A guy, exactly. Some guy I've never heard of before, Mark.
So
some guy that sounds like it's auto-generated in college football 25 name. That's what exactly that sounds like.
He's been on campus a long time. He's been in that program a long time. He's a program player. So, yeah, Texas A&M is going to be the best win. There would have to be drastic things to change for that not to be the case. So they are desperately hoping Texas A&M goes 10-2, 11-1. And then after that, wow. Yeah, Louisville's probably going to go 7-5. And Georgia Tech's going to go 6-6, 7-5. And that's it. That's it. Florida State is atrocious, and Virginia's not good, of course. And USC is going to go 6-6.
Yeah, I really hope when the playoff committee unveils their first ranking, Notre Dame is like in the low 20s type thing. Because I mean, seriously, this is a team that lost to Northern Illinois and has played absolutely nobody of any consequence.
Oh, when is
they
that
beat Louisville
coming
by
up?
the same score as SMU and
yeah. I've lost
Miami.
track of this, DeReal. When is the first unveiling?
No idea when it is. It's got to be soon, though. You would think
It's got to be soon. We're on the brink of November. I think they used to start those earlier, and now they've pushed them back because we'll go live right after that show. So that's usually on a Tuesday night. So I'm looking forward to that. Yes, somebody look that up for us. I would love to know. That's got to be coming up soon. And yeah, what are they
November
going to do
6th.
with a Notre Dame team with one loss?
November 6th.
November 6th. So we have, okay.
Or November 5th, I guess.
There's something going on November 5th that they're avoiding, understandably so. So they pushed it to Wednesday night. Okay.
That would make sense for me.
Yeah.
I guess other things have to take priority in life sometimes.
Some people may be preoccupied. Okay. Yeah. November 6th. That's a Wednesday.
Right.
All right.
And they're hanging their Yeah, they're hanging their head on the Navy and Army games as being these massive wins that they're going to get. First off, I don't know if they're good enough to even beat those teams. Notre Dame has proven outside of Louisville absolutely nothing this year, and Texas outside of past the Texas A&M game, proven nothing outside this year of being a great team. We have no evidence that they're a great team outside of that Texas A&M game, which is the first game of the season. Mike Elko, new offensive coordinator, new staff, probably getting into the rhythm of games. I'm not so sure if those two teams play this week, they would lose, have the same result. I think Texas A&M would win, to be honest with you. I think Texas A&M has improved drastically over the course of the season. I think Mike Elko is a good coach.
Mm-hmm.
I got a question in the chat saying, where should Bama be? Right now, there should be where exactly they are in the AP poll, around the 15 range. I mean, Alabama's not a great team, but they've got a much more quality win than basically anybody in the country in Georgia. And they lost to Tennessee by 1 score. So I know everybody hates Alabama and says Alabama's just completely out of this thing. It still wouldn't shock me if Alabama won the national championship at the end of the season with how crazy it is. I mean, they're talented enough. I still somewhat believe in their head coach to do it. And I mean, they've got good players. I mean, they just got good players everywhere, Mark, and they got dudes. And they've proven it by beating Georgia, and they're competing against these really good teams. Would it shock you if Alabama win? I mean, they're probably on the teeter of can they win. I know they lost to Vandy, but
well, that's becoming less and less embarrassing by the week.
Right, Vandy's ranked.
And they should be.
Yeah, Texas-Vandy, ranked matchup, right? Everybody had that at the beginning of the season.
Yes, Vandy only has 1 loss in the SEC.
Yeah, Vandy could represent the SEC. How about that? Vandy in the playoffs. How about that? That'd be something.
Yeah, we haven't thought of that one. We haven't reviewed that one, but yeah, we've got only 1 team left in the SEC. 2 teams are undefeated, and of course they're playing this weekend. LSU and Texas A&M undefeated in the conference, and then there's a glut of 1-loss teams. Right,
and I mean you're going to have the playoff or the tiebreaker system for the SEC and stuff be crazy. I looked at the ACC tiebreakers because I know this is something you've repeatedly mentioned. It's kind of weird because a lot of them assume a head-to-head type or a 2-team type tiebreaker system, and it doesn't work since there's 3 teams. So like the first 4 is all the same because they're all undefeated.
Mm-hmm.
The 5th one is based on your strength of schedule in ACC play. And I believe that's going to leave SMU out of it because they play your Virginia type teams more than your Clemson and Miami. So if they all go undefeated, it should be Clemson and Miami.
Yeah, we're going to look at that next week. I've got a little bit more time, hopefully, coming up this week, and we'll go through all the conferences and look at these scenarios and then go through the tiebreaker system because that's exactly where we're headed with that. I would hate to say I would be fascinated by it and would love to see it on one hand. I would hate to see it for the team that earned a conference championship slot as an undefeated team. But I want to see the system debunked. I want to see it exposed for what it is. It's a flawed system. And so, yes, Clemson and Pitt play, but otherwise we could have, if Clemson knocks out Pitt or vice versa, but I think this is the more reasonable or the most logical and without looking at the schedules right now. Yeah, Clemson, Miami, SMU, of course, do not play. They could all be undefeated. And then there has to be imposed a tiebreaker that goes and defaults to, as you mentioned, common opponents, but they're all undefeated. And then, yes, then you go to best schedule percentage, winning percentage for your conference games. And SMU, having not played the best teams, looks in line to be left out.
Right, which is very disappointing and sad because it's something completely out of your control. I'm surprised they didn't use like margin of victory against common opponents or something along those lines. That's more in your control.
Yep, it's within your control.
because I know they all play Louisville this year, which.
Yeah. If I'm SMU, I'm saying, yeah, you gave us this schedule. We had nothing to do with it.
Right now, it's hard to imagine if they all go undefeated, they're not going to be left out of the playoffs, any of them. But yet it's still weird to think 3 ACC teams are going to be in the playoffs. So how do we work in that dichotomy there?
Yeah, so there's going to be that comparison of 10-2 Big Ten and SEC teams against an 11-1 SMU team that lost to BYU and went undefeated against a poor ACC schedule that did not include Clemson or Miami.
I'm guessing you're currently giving the nod to the SEC/Big Ten teams.
Yes, because there's only one game difference. If there was two, and I don't even think that it should be looked at it that simply, but I think the committee would look at it that simply as, okay, we're not going to elevate a 9-3 Big Ten or SEC team past an 11-1 SMU team, but we will a 10-2 team.
Right. Now, would it change your opinion if that team is like an Indiana type team or a Missouri type team?
So Indiana has not lost, so they would have to lose 2 games. They
Michigan and Ohio State.
Yeah. Would they have any other wins on their schedule? I know they've got Purdue. They've got Washington this week. That's 9-2. They've got one other game. So who knows who else they play?
Michigan State.
So Indiana's best win would be Washington or Nebraska or Maryland. They basically just played SMU's schedule, except for now, if they lose to Ohio State impressively, they lose 28-24 to Ohio State. That might do it for them.
This doesn't mark, no matter what happens at the end of the season, the only thing I'll guarantee, I know you hate guarantees, but I'll guarantee there will be some sort of controversy with some group saying we should have been in, and this is why it doesn't work.
Yes.
I guarantee that'll happen.
I don't mind your guarantee because I've made similar guarantees to say, I've been saying all off season, there is going to be chaos in at least one conference, and I can't wait for it. I hope it's multiple conferences.
Oh, I think it'll probably be multiple conferences. I mean, the Big 12 is probably the second most likely, but Iowa State and BYU just kept winning games in miracle fashion. By the way, BYU is an underdog this week to UCF. Tells you how bad BYU is.
I saw that. I was a bit surprised by that. Now, if Texas A&M runs the table before the Texas game, loses to Texas, Texas wins the rest of its games, Georgia runs the table, and there's somebody else in that category. I came up with a 4-way tie at 7-1 in the SEC. Well, I guess it would be LSU. If LSU loses to Texas A&M and then they run the table, we'd have a 4-way tie at 7-1 in the SEC.
Wouldn't that be fun to deal with?
Yeah.
Let's see. 3 or more team procedure. Best winning percentage of the tied team games against each other. Then record against the number 1 seed and proceeding down through other teams. Then a coin flip necessary between 2 teams. Or if it's a 3 team, like we're saying, it's a draw by the commissioner.
And what's beautiful about this is, as we know, in the SEC and the Big Ten, it's not as big a deal because those teams are going to make the playoffs anyway. But in the Big 12 and in the ACC, if some team gets screwed out of a conference championship game with an undefeated record or just gets screwed, period, even with a 1-loss conference record and don't have the opportunity to play for a playoff. Yeah.
Okay. So it looks like tiebreaker C is record against highest place common conference opponent in the conference standings. And then you proceed that through the rest of the conference. So I don't imagine that through that tiebreaker, you wouldn't still have more than 2 teams in there. But that is very confusing and complex to do, and I don't know the current math on that situation.
Yeah, I don't either, but this is something I would love to delve into coming up here this week.
Right. The only thing I would say off the top of my head is I would imagine it would favor LSU since they would have played Texas A&M, and Texas A&M is currently 4-0 in conference play. So they're probably going to end up 6-2 in this scenario, or 7-1 as well. So I imagine they would have the be favored to get in for sure.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but anyway, Mark, that's all I got for you. We need a mathematician to explain this all to us. I thought football was just about on the gridiron, but
Well, not when you got 40-17 conferences. So we will don the hat of the mathematician next week and give it a look.
Yeah, I'm just hoping my team can win a game. That's all my goal is just win a game before the season ends. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, the playoff run came to an abrupt halt.
Yeah, basketball season's just right around the corner. I'm trying to teach Jackson that.
Very good. All right, Daryl. Okay, so yeah, Voice of College Football here, of course, with you post-game Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So check us out after the ball games. Don't know what we'll do tomorrow night because we've got Rutgers and USC kicking off at 11 p.m. Eastern time. They're going to play a 3.5-hour game. It's going to be 2:30 in the morning. Yeah. And then we also have this important Boise State UNLV game. Maybe we'll do a pregame. Maybe that. We'll do a little like 9 to 10:30 pregame. Maybe we'll do that. Once again, Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. Please use the Amazon link when you shop on Amazon. And I completely understand that you don't do that and why you don't do that. There are zillions of videos out there that I watch on YouTube that I enjoy, and I forget to hit the like button. So I do it as well. But please don't follow my lead, and let's all be better at this together. So please hit the like button, and please grab the Amazon link and shop on Amazon. Next week, we will be able to officially release this baby. Launch date October 29th. That is a Tuesday, next Tuesday. So we will provide the link for you. Disputed National Champions. If you're a college football nerd, and you are, because otherwise you wouldn't be here. If you just stumbled upon us and you're looking for like, I don't know, a needlepoint channel or something, then you're in the wrong place. But otherwise, yes, you'll want to pick one of these up. Disputed National Champions of the 1990s. College football's historical 1990s reset. This is not just a historical book. It is that because I chose the 1990s because it is the most transformative period of time in determining a champion in college football. We went from strictly a poll system. Then we had implemented a bowl coalition, which ensured that the number 1 and 2 teams in the nation would play in a bowl game. That was a major step, unless those teams resided in the Pac-12 or the Pac-10 at the time, or the Big Ten. And then we had, of course, the move into the BCS, which transformed the sport. So I am dissecting every season of the 1990s. So please check it out. Storylines, scenarios, rankings, who got left out, who got screwed, was the vote credible, valid? And if you know me, I'm going to pick apart why most of these votes were not valid or credible. And then what was the impact of those particular seasons going forward? And then we make it a forward-thinking book, not just a historical book, by taking each one of these seasons in the 1990s and putting it into the BCS formula, putting it into the 4-team college football playoff formula, the 12-team format, the 14-team format. All right, and much more. All right, let's talk Pitt football. They won a big one tonight. They're 7-0. Got our guy, Talk is Pitt. Congratulations.
How you doing, Mark?
Thanks for waiting.
Yeah, I almost hit the exit button because all I heard the real MVP do was yap, to the point where I forgot what I wanted to dispute what he was saying. But I think it's time to start putting Pitt in that category as a legit football team. I'm not ready to put them in the playoff scenario. The only way I'll put that is if we somehow go down to SMU next week and win, which I don't think we will now that Eli Holstein probably won't play in that game because he was concussed against Syracuse. So he went into the medical tent and then went into the locker room. That's never a good sign. But, if hell freezes over, hopefully it will, and we somehow knock off Clemson undefeated, then that's when I'll start putting Pitt into the playoff category. I just don't think they're there yet, honestly. They're not. And I wish people would stop saying, well, who has Pitt played? Well, half the good teams out there haven't played anybody either. Miami's one of them.
Talk is Pitt. First of all, I don't want to rain on your parade because your team's off to a great start and they've earned all this. Now, they played close games, but close games count. So they played a lot of close games, but we've seen teams throughout history play a lot of close games and be able to show that they can win close games against marginal opponents. So we know that they beat Cal. Cal missed a field goal late and they won by 2 points, and we could go through all of them. West Virginia, that game was one of the best games one of the best fourth quarters I've seen the entire season. And of course the big comeback against Cincinnati. But I will push back on that, because if you want to name me a team, I'll tell you who they've beaten that's good.
Yeah. I mean, I feel my SMU. I feel SMU has had an easy schedule their first year in the ACC, but like you said earlier, that's not their fault. They're not the ones who make the schedule. That's the administration. They're the ones who do that, if I'm not mistaken, correct? I don't think the team or anybody on the staff has anything or any say into what teams they play. You know more than me. So is that true? The staff has nothing to do with who they play?
Well, you're about 90% true, because of what happened in the ACC, as you well know, is once the divisions were banished and they went to a full conference, those schools gave feedback to the conference office to say, these are the permanent opponents we believe we should have. So, of course, Florida State's going to say, we need to play Miami every year. We should play Clemson every year. And the conference would want Clemson and Florida State to play every year. So they gave their recommendations on who their three, I think, I'm trying to think what term they used for it, but basically 3 permanent opponents, who those 3 would be. Now, the schools didn't necessarily get their recommendation, get their desires filled. They just gave a proposal, but the rest of the schedule it's rotated evenly. So for Pitt, I assume that their games are Syracuse. They play Syracuse every year, and I forget the other 2. The other 2 are probably
Syracuse, Boston College, and supposed to be Virginia Tech.
I'll look
it
up.
We don't play Virginia Tech this year.
Yeah, okay. So I'll find who that is. Yeah, I think that they had to put that off once they added Stanford, SMU, and Cal, because that really screwed up the schedule, and then they had to kind of reconfigure all that going forward. But yes, the schools don't have anything to do with who they're playing in conference.
Yeah, and the issue that I have with the overall image of Pitt, and this just popped in my head, that the real MVP said nobody cares about Pitt. That's a lie. People are talking about Pitt because they're undefeated. They haven't been 7-0 since 1982. I wasn't even born. I wasn't even born until 1989. So for Pitt to do something that they haven't done in 40 years and still look at it, oh, well, it's just Pitt, nobody cares. Well, obviously you care enough to sit there and say nobody cares.
Well, talk is Pitt. First of all, thank you for reminding me how old I am, because I very
Sorry.
much remember the 1982 season. That Pitt team, I believe, was preseason number 1.
Yeah.
And they finished 9-3. They lost to SMU, the Pony Express, in the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah.
So anyway,
go ahead.
The other thing I have to credit Pitt with, talking about the schedule and the intent of scheduling, is, of course, the West Virginia game is a phenomenal game, should be played. Of course, we missed that game for a long, long time, and now the two have gotten together again. So in addition to playing West Virginia, I'm not going to try to sell Cincinnati as some powerhouse, but unlike most teams, they did schedule 2 power conference teams out of conference.
They've actually done that like 3-4 years in a row now, and next year I believe they're doing the same thing. If you can pull up next year's schedule, I know we play Notre Dame, and we actually play Miami next year as well. I can't remember who the out of conference teams are, not counting West Virginia. And the bad thing about next year is that's the last year Pitt will play West Virginia for 3 years. And that's going to hurt, especially if Pitt gets some momentum. They start getting high-end recruits in there, because we hired a new athletic director. I don't know if you knew that, Alan Green from Tennessee. The first thing he said is, we got to get NIL on track. We got to get money in here to bring players here who, because let's just face it, half of college football nowadays is all about money. These kids, they want the money. For whatever reason it is, I don't fault them, because if I played college football, which I had a chance to, but health problems took that away, I would have done the same thing. I wouldn't go somewhere if NIL was legal and somebody is trying to lowball me. So I understand that. But with our past administration, what they did not understand is how to raise revenue for for high-end recruits. And I'm surprised we were even able to get Eli Holstein here, because he's getting paid $400,000 in his NIL deal. Getting paid a lot of money. And that's like triple than what everybody else is making. Now, everybody on Pitt's roster that is on scholarship does have an NIL deal of some sort. Nobody makes less than $10,000 in NIL funds. And that's the one thing that I'm glad that they're finally starting to realize, hey, we're not competing with the NIL. And I can understand why people are hesitant to be like, oh, well, Pitt can't compete with this, Pitt can't compete with that. And it's true to an extent, because past administration didn't just want to do that. And that's this year's schedule I'm looking at. But I think Pitt right now is in a much better place than what I thought they would be, what the rest of the fan base thought they would be, and probably what you and everybody else thought they would be.
Yeah, this was a 3-9 football team last year, and of course that's an aberration. Pat Narduzzi's done a nice job. He had the best record in the Coastal Division going into last year, and so they were one of my big selections for one of those +3 win total teams. I think I picked Pitt to be 6-6 or 7-5. Yeah, I did not anticipate this. Although nothing they've done has surprised me. They're not steamrolling teams until tonight, of course. That was an impressive showing. But they have shown the ability to win close games for sure.
Which is something like, take, for instance, the California game. If that game was last year, Pitt would have lost. If that game was any year prior to last year, or even this year, if that mattered, Pitt would have lost those games. They have a tendency to, one, lose games they shouldn't, and two, lose close games where they're either leading or it's tied or they have a chance to take the lead. And what I noticed about California is a lot of people don't give credit for how good their defense really is. If I'm not mistaken, according to Pro Football Focus, they have a top 10 defense. And it showed against Pitt because California was able to counter everything we threw at them, whether it was Desmond Reed or Eli Holstein or whatever the case may be. But for the defense for Pitt, that game and even the North Carolina game, and you could probably even bring in the West Virginia game, Pitt was able to eliminate a lot of what last year would have cost them big time. And when I mean cost them, I'm like getting blown out. First of all, I cannot think of a time where, one, we've intercepted a quarterback 5 times. 2, 3 of those interceptions were returned for a touchdown. And 3, we just made Kyle McCord look like Phil Jurkovec. That's exactly what we did. We made him look like Phil Jurkovec. He couldn't do anything, and McCord wasn't even able to get into the end zone until we started putting our 2s and our 3s in. Our 1s were in, didn't do anything. 2s started coming in, and 3s, that's when he was finally able to move the ball. Now, as I'm looking at my cellular, looking at the screen, all the games they have left on their schedule are winnable games. But I caution some of those teams they play as winnable because, let's just face it, Clemson is way more talented than Pitt. But past history between Pitt and Clemson shows that doesn't matter. It just doesn't. Now, what does scare me is SMU. Even though SMU will be without their leading receiver, RJ Maryland, he's out for the season.
Yep.
That could, give us hope. And I don't wish injury on a player. I don't. I think anybody who does that is wrong. I always want people or teams to have all their chess pieces together before we go down and play them, because to me that makes me feel like the win is more legit. And now that SMU doesn't have their best player, and Pitt probably won't have Holstein either, I'm not too sure about this game. I'm not.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Talkus Pitt, that even though you lost your starting quarterback, and that's unfortunate, and that's something I failed to mention before you came on, but I did see that near the end of, and it was doubly unfortunate that it happened in a game in which he didn't need to be in the game at that point. But I'm not criticizing Pat Narduzzi, because most coaches will keep their starting quarterback in until the game is just completely, there is no chance that the other team can come back. And so most coaches would have still had their starting quarterback in, but he barely won the job over Nate Yarnell, correct?
I want to say yes and no, because when the media asked Pat Narduzzi and Cade Bell what made Eli Holstein win, they pretty much said the same exact thing that would have made, or that they were saying about Nate Yarnell. He's not turning the ball over as much, or this, that, and the third. I think the reason why they were hesitant to not go with Yarnell is because his lack of mobility. He's not mobile. He's not. He's like 6'7", 220 pounds. He's not that fast, but he is accurate. So it still gives me confidence that he can go in and maybe give SMU a run for the money. I'm not saying he's going to win the game, but a lot of people are picking SMU to actually blow us out. I've seen that over the past couple of weeks. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but SMU struggled against Nevada. I know that was the first game of the season, and you really shouldn't critique a game or critique a team off the first game of the season. However, Nevada is nobody. So, I mean, blowing Pitt out, I'm not saying it can't happen. It probably could, but without their best receiver, and SMU's defense is sus. Like you were saying earlier with Syracuse, they're all about their offense. That's what they are. Their defense has a lot of holes, and they're very suspect at best. And then they show up against superior competition, if you want to call it that, and then play down to inferior competition.
All right, Talkers Pitt, we appreciate you being here. Thanks for calling.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Congratulations again. It does my heart good to see some of these teams that are little regarded make a run, and certainly Pitt's now 7 games into the season and undefeated. All right, Talkers Pitt, have a good one.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. I want to remind everyone that the Ole Miss show with myself and Leanne Herring is Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We had a scheduling change this week. It will be Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time going forward, but this week, Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, so you can catch that right here. But, of course, we want to move you on over to the Ole Miss channel. So please check out our Ole Miss Rebels channel for Ole Miss live each and every week. We have a treat for you very soon on the Ole Miss channel with our Ole Miss live show. You will no longer have to tolerate me for long because we have some exciting additions to our Ole Miss live show. But we come your way Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time with myself and Leanne Herring, and then we do Ole Miss postgame as well. And the Rebels take on the Sooners this week. Who would have thought this entering the season? Ole Miss is a 21-point favorite. Ole Miss with 2 losses is a 21-point favorite over hapless Oklahoma. All right. Again, we will give you more details on this one next week. Why you can't necessarily buy this week, I don't know. That's what the publisher tells me, though, to wait for the official launch on October 29th. But we will tell you more about that and give you the link, and we thank you for your support. I think this will be a fun read for you college football addicts, and it's a quick read. It's 100 pages. You got a lot of lists. You got a lot of breakdowns, a lot of scenarios, and we will continue on. We've got a Friday night with Louisville and Boston College, but we've got the headliner at night with UNLV and Boise State. We've got USC and Rutgers as well. And we got our buddy David Greenshield here.
Yes. But by the way, is that a coffee table book, Mark? Or, how would you classify that? Looks like a coffee table book.
We can give it the coffee table book status. Sure, you can read like one section at a time and then put it down and, read one year at a time.
Okay.
You'll maybe enjoy 1996 in particular.
There you go. Well, there you go. Maybe a little 98 in there mixed in, Mark.
No, of course, 1998. Yes.
Yeah. Lived through those years, unfortunately. By the way, good to see you back in your humble abode there. I'm used to see you and you do videos with like a tree behind you or a bookcase or something like that. It's good to see the helmets are back
this week, but we had a great week.
Yeah. Congrats, Mark, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, let's talk a little college football. First of all, I was talking last week on the Sunday show, my first appearance, Jackson and the crew doing a good job there. I just have to say, Pat Narduzzi, interesting enough, was he actually on the hot seat last year, Mark? Was I hearing that correctly at Pitt? I mean, was that fair to say?
Well, you may be correct because from a record standpoint, it was just one down season.
Yeah.
Which usually doesn't get a guy that has accomplished something at a school in that position. But there were some things off the field related to NIL that weren't necessarily a great look in regards to him criticizing other coaches and called into question. Just he wasn't endearing himself to the fan base, let's say. So
Yeah.
it was in addition to the 3-9 season that it seemed to be trending the wrong way.
Yeah.
But here they are at 7-0. It's not the most impressive 7-0, but 7-0 is 7-0.
Yeah, because he had a solid team a few years ago with the Pickett team, from what I remember.
Yeah, they won the ACC in
Right.
21.
It was they lost to Sparty in a bowl game.
Yes, they lost the Peach Bowl to Sparty.
Right.
They lost their quarterback. Well, Pickett didn't play, and then
Right,
they
yeah,
lost their backup
hmm
sometime in the second half, and a pick six kind of sealed it. But then they followed that up with a 9-4 season
hmm
and a win over Dorian Thompson-Robinson and UCLA.
Right. I mean, by the way, looking forward tonight to the Holstein-McCord quarterback duel. The first Super Bowl I watched, Mark, was, by the way, I was blessed. It was Marino and Montana at Stanford Stadium, which, talk about it, was supposed to be an all-timer. As NFL Films once put it, Dan Marino's season turned into Joe Montana's day. Which was a hell of a line when you stop to think about how that game went. But we got Holstein and McCord tonight, and did Honda revert back to the old Honda tonight? Did I see a broke down Honda tonight, Mark? That was pretty rough.
Well, he never threw 5 interceptions at Ohio State.
No, I know. I'm teasing, but I'm being a little rough. Honda was having a great year until this point. By the way, this was obviously a rough spot.
Yeah, he certainly didn't help himself,
Mhm.
but did he throw the ball that poorly? No.
No.
There was a convergence of just a lot of flukiness there. But the first pick, I don't know how much of this game you watched.
I caught most of the first half, and I was kind of out. Once you get to 31-0, Mark, you kind of
you don't
you look for
need to
other
be checking in
viewing.
with that.
Checked in on the Rams Vikings
Yes,
after that
with the NFL playing, of course.
Yeah, sure.
And the Rams won, correct?
Yeah, Rams won. Really good game, actually, 28-20.
Yeah,
I've talked to my NFL
Yep.
people, by the way. Some of my NFL people, I'm swaying them more towards college football. They're becoming more and more college football people. They're NFL. They were like diehard NFL people, but they're actually enjoying this college football season.
How much do you enjoy the NFL today versus at whatever your peak interest was?
It's a great question. I've thought a lot about that lately. I would still say, well, first of all, I don't like any team more than I probably like Ohio State. I think I may have mentioned that before. But as a sport, just to watch, and there's a lot of people that disagree with me, and a lot of Ohio State fans disagree with me on this even too, just to watch a general college football game, i.e., like tonight, Syracuse-Pitt. Versus watching, because there's a lot of people I know that would rather watch Syracuse-Pitt even over the Rams and the Vikings. Now, those are 4 teams I could care less about. Just the obvious 4 teams I could care less about, when it comes to both college and the NFL. I typically would prefer the NFL game. As I said to you before, the NFL is usually, the games are played at a higher level. And what is the stat? 60 to 65% of NFL games over the last 20 years have been decided by 7 points or less. You can't say that about college football. You get a lot of blowouts in college is where I'm going with that.
Yeah. Well,
So-
people may be surprised to hear this that don't listen to me on a regular basis or just peek in. And so, voice of college football, of course, we know what the number one sport is here.
Yeah.
But to your point, correct me if I'm wrong, the Thursday night selection of games has increased in value considerably in the last few years.
Yeah, well, you know what though? They haven't done Al Michaels and Herbie a lot of favors though over the years. They've given them some dog games. I mean,
Okay.
some bow wow dog games.
All right.
Tonight was decent though. I mean,
Yeah.
those were decent teams, but
So, because prior to that, the Thursday night game was always an awful game. There was
Yeah.
a lot of Texans, a lot of Jags
yeah,
on Thursday nights. Up until 3 or 4 years ago, I always watched the Thursday night game over watching college football.
really.
You wouldn't think that would be the case. Now, I was keeping my eye, of course, and still watching NC State and Wake Forest, but I was more intent on watching the Jags and the Bengals for sure.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I know more about the history of the NFL and modern history, meaning like last 50 years, than I do about college football even.
Well, I would say this though, and maybe I've already asked you this, Mark. Did you say, are you more of a college football fan now versus 15, 20 years ago?
No,
Yeah.
I'm less of a college football fan. I'm a less of an everything fan.
Okay. Is that age thing coming in, Mark?
Absolutely.
A jaded Mark
I
Rogers.
have interest in so many other things
Yeah.
now. But I will say that so my beloved, I will still call them the Indians.
Yes.
So I haven't watched or paid attention to Cleveland baseball since like 18. I was trying to figure that out the other day, talking to my best friend and my son, when I just fell off the wagon.
Yeah.
I think it was the 18 season. So I was fully invested before, fully invested.
Okay.
Baseball package, the whole deal.
Yeah.
And but they pulled me back in for this series. I watched every game. I watched with my best friend games 1 and 2, and then I traveled to Connecticut, was hanging out with my son. We watched. He picked me up from the airport in the midst of the home run.
Oh, the game 3
off Luke Weaver, and then the tie game, and then the walk off to win it.
Yeah.
That was phenomenal. And then we watched the other 2 games. And yeah, so I took in the entire series.
Yeah, I baseball kind of weaned for me. I don't know if it might have been a tad bit earlier. Like I would say definitely through the early 2000s, 90 and early 2000s, I was a hardcore baseball fan. Hardcore.
Yeah, I
Um,
was.
well, especially as and maybe the one thing with baseball is just kind of some of the players changed too. I don't know. I kind of liked a lot of the players from the 90s and the early 2000s a little bit more than some of the players. I don't know. I
Yeah.
just that's the one thing about baseball. You appreciate the sport, but you also appreciate the sport for the players too.
Oh yeah.
Whereas football is just football. The players come and go. It's still football. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We just rearrange the chairs.
Yeah, baseball players have such long careers. You get someone to take, even if you don't root for a player, you're just used to seeing Todd Helton and Larry Walker and
Right.
Derek Jeter, of course, and
Ken
you
Griffey
see
or
these
so-
guys
yeah,
for
yeah.
a generation,
Right.
forever.
That's right. Back to college football,
Okay,
if
sure.
I may, Mark. I want to ask you something about the Kurt Signetti love that he's getting this year. And I had posted a comment in a chat about a little bit of a pump the brakes. And I know that we're not necessarily in a pump the brakes kind of society or college football kind of world, maybe nowadays. But don't we have to see this guy do it for at least a couple more years before, we really start to pass out all these other Power 5 jobs to Kurt Signetti? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, a huge percentage of this roster, Mark, is transfer portal players. Could we ask Mike Norvell how the transfer portal giveth and then the transfer portal taketh away? I mean, shouldn't we give him, a little bit more time, a little bit more, let's pump the brakes and let's see him do this for a few more years kind of thing? I mean, your thoughts?
Well, I think we would find if we went through the last 20 years of college football that coaches have not had to prove much to gain a big job.
Mm.
That it's taken like 1 year.
Mhm.
Boom. Mel Tucker. Boom. Mel Tucker didn't even give us 1 year and he went to Michigan State. But bad example. So
Yeah.
like it doesn't take much to turn athletic directors' heads in the direction of let's go grab this guy. This guy's a hot commodity. Now I'm talking perception. You're talking reality. Like,
Yes,
should we invest in this guy? Should we?
I try to
Buy the
live in that
stock.
world, Mark. I try to live.
Well, I do too.
You
I'm
know?
right there with you. So yes, it is impressive what Indiana is accomplishing because they're not only winning these games, they are doing to these teams what the upper echelon teams, they're beating UCLA by 4 touchdowns and Nebraska by 7 touchdowns. That, by the way, is a big red flag for me with Nebraska football.
Yeah, that was bad.
That should have been a showdown. That should have been a great game. That
Yeah.
should have been a measuring stick game for them that they should have measured up to. They weren't playing Ohio State. They are, of course, this week.
Right.
They're playing Indiana, and they're getting clocked by 7 touchdowns. I find it unfortunate. Now we'll see if they're able, meaning Indiana, able to take on Washington and get through this game without Curtis Rourke at quarterback.
Yeah.
Because I would think it would be unfortunate for us to sit here on Sunday and try to evaluate whether they would have won the game with him and they only lost by a field goal. And now that kind of tarnishes the season to a certain extent. And injuries are part of it. And you got to work through those. But I want to see them at full strength. Hopefully he can make it back. I've not looked at any kind of prognosis on him for the stretch drive because I want to see Indiana at full strength or as close to it as is reasonable in football to see what they can do against Ohio State and then even against Michigan and teams that are now their measuring stick.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I plausibly see a way to 10-2 there. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Maybe even 11-1. However, I will say, I'm I'd be hesitant though, Mark, because again, what percentage of this roster is portal? This is a heavy portal roster, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah,
now,
you're talking long term.
Yeah, that's right. Because you understand where I was going with the Norvell comparison at Florida State last year. I mean, I don't necessarily. I mean, it's not maybe quite apple to apple, but it's I don't know. It's pretty close. I mean, and the one thing I think about, I just have to say this about the portal real quick. You know how we always say that college football in many ways is morphing into the NFL to where basically we've expanded the playoff like the NFL. We have a transfer portal, which is our free agency. And obviously we have a way to compensate players just like they do at the NFL level. That all being said, I kind of put this in terms of recruiting to college football is to what the NFL draft is, the draft is to the NFL. And I think the portal in many ways, I thought would be kind of like what free agency is to the NFL from the standpoint where you build your roster through recruiting, you build your roster through the draft in the NFL. And then with the portal, you kind of go out and get that player or two to maybe put you over the top.
Absolutely.
If you need a corner, you need a receiver, you need a tackle, whatever the case might be, and you get that guy that maybe that missing link that you need to maybe put you over the top to fill a weakness. Is it more or less you're seeing now though that teams are almost just going all in and just building up rosters with it though, Mark? Does it seem that way?
Well, what it is job security is only as lasting as your last record.
Sure.
Your last performance and season, and coaches aren't thinking, okay, I have job security and therefore I want to do this the right way. And you're right that I don't know what the percentage breakdown should be, but something like 80 to 20 NFL draft / recruiting versus free agency / transfer portal.
Right.
Or look at Ohio State. Not to bring up our favorite team here, but whether it works out for them this season in winning the ultimate, you got to think that they executed the transfer portal about as well as an elite team can. That roster is still 90+% homegrown and signed, but they filled needs. Need a complimentary back. Not that he's a complimentary back, but the 1A, the Travion Henderson, need the dominant safety, need the center, boom, quarterback. Okay, 4 additions, that's it. It's not, man, you look at that Florida State team over the last 2 years, everybody was a transfer.
Yeah, I think that it's the overturn of the roster is the big thing. Because remember, you could pop up and have that nice season and you can get some security for a period of time, but it's still going to eventually catch up to you in the end. That's why I agree with you. The one good thing with Ohio State is, and they had to get their NIL game up, and I'm finally glad that they were able to do so in all the collectives and everything like that. Although, eventually this thing is going to be, we've talked about ad nauseum how this thing's going to have to be reined in. And, you're going to have a structure to this sooner rather than later, because as I said, once this thing was thrown out there, it was done half-ass and it became the Wild West there for a period of time, as we talked about on more than a few occasions. So, but until we get to that point, you really have to get your collective game up and you got to be in the game. And I said when Ohio State did what they had to do, I mean, in many ways, they were just trying to fight fire with fire. You know what I mean? If all the, if this is the way the game is played, so be it. You have to do what you have to do. But I agree with you, Mark. I think 80-20 is right. I even could still make the case 90-10 is right. But
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Because recruiting is still going to be the lifeblood. What are your thoughts? By the way, you're going to do the call. You say you're mixed on maybe doing the call-in show tomorrow. Okay, with that, I guess with that time of that USC game, it kind of
Well, the
throws a little
USC
bit.
game and also, or let's call it the Rutgers game. It's the Rutgers game. They've got a better
Oh,
record. It's the Rutgers game, everyone.
well, hey, Rutgers is not necessarily. I was on Rutgers a few weeks ago talking about Mark, and now the last few weeks, not so much. By the way,
Yes, and if I recall, my response to you was, yeah,
yeah,
I wouldn't be too high on Rutgers.
right.
So yes, it's the Rutgers USC game, but it's also the Boise State UNLV game late
Yeah,
night. So
yeah,
maybe we'll do a pregame. Those games are at 10:30 Eastern, and maybe we'll come on at 9 and do like a 9 to 10:30.
okay. Well, I'm gonna try. I'm gonna call you tomorrow to talk about the Saturdays, but real quick on tomorrow. With Boise State UNLV, by the way, in my preseason pick, I did pick Boise as my non-Power 5 team as my 12 seed to make the playoff.
I would have to double check as to whether I did. I was going to join you for a second, but I don't want to say that for sure. I think I did.
Okay, yeah, I had them losing to Oregon in the 5-12 matchup, which is still very plausible if Ohio State can do what they need to do, which is run the table and then beat Oregon in the rematch.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I've got. By the way, best running back in the country.
Probably. He is statistically.
I mean, if he pops off another 200-yard game, Mark, and kind of keeps this run going,
Yeah.
he's got to find his way to New York here.
Oh, he's going to find his way to New York, barring injury. I would be a bit surprised if he did not, because I think that his story, just as a group of 5 player, is going to work its way well into the New York and ESPN narrative. Plus, he's earning it. I'm not saying he's not earning it. Absolutely, he's earning it. Plus, as a running back, I think there's less opportunity for a drop off. If
Right.
you have shown the talent to be able to be that successful week after week, the performances are more stable and consistent. Whereas a quarterback, some of the quarterbacks kind of play themselves out of it with a bad game or
That's
two,
right.
a loss here and there, where I think he'll just continue to motor along. There's 172, there's 209, there's 157, there's, he's just going to,
Yep.
there's 3 touchdowns, there's 2, there's 4, and he's just going to pile up these numbers, and I don't see him falling off. So, yeah, this is going to be fun to watch him tomorrow night against UNLV. And that is a bit of an elimination game for the playoff.
Yeah, I agree. I'm leaning Boise State could pull away in that game. I could see Boise State winning that game comfortably. I don't know what your thoughts are on that one.
Well, I would agree with that. I don't know what the spread is on that game.
Yeah, I haven't checked line yet. I didn't know if you were already there.
I haven't dug in, but I need to do that very soon.
Yeah, you got Merrill on tomorrow, right, Mark?
We got Merrill. We usually do them on Thursday, but I had no internet here until a couple hours ago, so we could not record Steve today.
Okay.
So hopefully we will get together on Friday. Yes.
Okay. I need some help on my pad. Well, I went 2-2 last week. I would say I want to make a quick comment on USC Rutgers before I go, and then I'll try and catch you tomorrow. For by the way, you're going to bring back back with Sunday Talk. I missed you on Sunday Talk last week, Mark. Our little Sunday conversation that will be back this weekend, correct?
Yes, it will be. Again, we had a different schedule,
Yeah. No, understood.
personal schedule this past week.
Understand. Quick thought on Rutgers USC before I let you go, though. As I said before, this has got to be rock bottom for Lincoln Riley, and that's an interesting. This is kind of a crossroads moment for them. Um, is there a feeling that he's got to close out this season with a certain kind of record there? I mean, I know they've got. I mean, it's a welcome to the Big Ten moment for them. I know Tim has talked about their shortcomings on the offensive line on his show. I think they're a team with some skill. I think Moss is a solid college quarterback. I don't think he's great, but I mean, I look at their team and Lincoln Riley was getting so much love a couple of years ago. Remember the Dallas Cowboys were talking about getting him as
Sure.
a head coach, and boy, that shows you how things can turn around rather quickly. Um, just when you look at this thing for them, long haul, is your a feeling here that he has to close out with a certain kind of momentum this season, or
To
do we
keep his job?
well, at least to prevent it from, people going to, well, next year is it, it's hot seat, it's make or break. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are.
Well, he may have already reached that. Now, of course, he can go on a 5-game run and finish 8-4, and it will look okay. But I think that he's not going to lose his job regardless of his record. Now, he could, as I think you're alluding to, set himself up for a make or break
Yeah.
2025. And I think he is going to be there almost regardless. Yeah, this team is a very odd team to watch and very odd team to evaluate their results, because how many teams in the Big Ten would take Penn State to overtime and beat LSU? How
Right.
many teams in the Big Ten are capable of doing that, or running off 28 consecutive points against Wisconsin in the second half and win the game by 17? Outside of Ohio State and Oregon, I don't know who those other teams, besides, of course, Penn State themselves. So when they're playing well, they can almost play, dare I say, with everybody in the conference or anybody in the conference, but they're so wildly inconsistent and they've just tanked. It's been a combination of players not making plays, but also questionable coaching
Yeah.
decisions, management in the fourth quarter that has put them in harm's way to lose these games. Who had USC losing to Maryland and Minnesota?
Yeah, I mean, dare I say, has he had James Franklin / Les Miles brain farts at the end of these games, Mark? I mean, I've talked about the clock management at the end of the team up north game, and then even at the end of the Penn State game, I thought that they looked kind of out of sorts there in the last minute or two of that game.
So Les Miles is a completely different guy. He's in his own category when it comes to late game blunders. He's
That's
just
true.
yes. But James Franklin, yes, he and Lincoln Riley, they need to find some kind of coaching clinic to camp out in this off season.
Yes, the clock management clinic. Yeah, I mean, that one last week too. I thought, I mean, to totally let slip away. Billy Edwards was slicing and dicing them at quarterback for Maryland. There, it was tough to watch, and they got off to a good start in that game too.
Sure.
So, All right, my friend. Well, it's a pleasure. I'll look for your post when you want to get together, and you're thinking maybe around the 9:30 time frame tomorrow night or somewhere
About
in there.
9 p.m., I'm thinking.
All right. Well, I will look for the post. You have yourself a good evening, Mark.
Thank you, David.
Take
Appreciate
care
it.
now. Mhm.
Again, we got the Ole Miss live show coming up Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. That will not be the permanent home, nor will this channel be the permanent home. That's going to be over on the Ole Miss channel. But for right now, we got Leanne Herring and myself. Ole Miss live Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern time. Please be here. And we've got our guy, Adam, checking in. Adam, thank you for your patience tonight.
Hey, Mark, how are you doing?
I am doing great. How are you?
All right, great to talk to you. I won't be on too long. I just have a few questions for you. So, Pitt defeats Syracuse tonight, and Pitt is 7-0. So, I'm going to go out on a limb and predict that Pitt is going to lose to Clemson and possibly to SMU and is not going to win the ACC. My question for you is, would you nonetheless select Pitt for the playoffs over the Big 12 champion?
So, of course, you're not talking reality because they would not be selected. The Big 12 champion will be in the playoff.
Right.
So you're talking about, okay. Well, you've got to give me a Big 12 champion, and you've got to give me their credentials.
Okay, so BYU or Iowa State, and they're undefeated.
No, I would not select Pitt over those teams.
So why do you think that conference champions should get automatic bids when conferences like the Big 12 typically have schedules that are much weaker? And if they had played, say, even in the SEC, and particularly in the SEC or Big 10, they might be mediocre at best.
Okay, so there's two things at play here. One
Okay.
is that you come from a place where throughout our conversations for the many months, you have established a point of view where you want to select the best teams, regardless of where they come from, to participate in the playoff. And of course, that none of us know exactly who those teams are, but you want the best minds in the sport and the metrics and the results and all of that to be evaluated to a T to determine those 3 teams, 8 teams, 12 teams, whatever the number is, to participate in a championship tournament.
Right.
Without caring who won what conference championship. If the SEC 5th place team is good enough to compete for a national championship, so be it, versus a Big 12 champion, for example, who is not shown the ability to compete for a national championship. I still respect the structure of the sport, that we have built a structure, and therefore we have to reward and recognize teams that have succeeded within that structure. And what we have is a 4, soon to be 5 conference power structure, and those teams need to be rewarded for winning a championship. I also, even if we take it back to your approach of just flat out selecting the best teams, I don't know that you're making the best comparison. I would have a more difficult time if you were comparing a Pitt team versus a Big Ten or an SEC team. And Iowa State as an undefeated team, I think, will have much more earned a playoff spot as a versus a 10-2 Pitt team.
Okay, that's a fair point. And this is my last theoretical point because I actually have 2 practical questions. When looking at large, teams for the playoffs, could you ever see yourself picking a 6-6 team over a 9-3 team? For example, if a team started out 9-0, then finished 0-3 with 3 losses to unranked teams, versus a team that started out 3-6 but finished 3-0 with 3 wins against top 25 teams. Could you ever see a situation where you would do that?
You are bringing up an argument that outside of this show, not to pat ourselves on the back here, I don't hear brought up anywhere else. You're bringing it up
No.
right now. I've brought it up in the past. And that is, are we rewarding the entirety of the season, or are we selecting the best teams on December 5th? Meaning, are we sitting here on Selection Sunday? I'm just throwing out a date. It's roughly December 5th, and saying, these are the 12 best teams in the country right now, or these are the 12 best teams over the course of the last 3 months and what they have accomplished over the last 3 months.
Right.
Your USC Trojans, case in point, in 2016, lost 3 of their first 4 games.
Yeah.
Put Sam Darnold in the lineup. Now, he was responsible for one of those losses, but played very well. They went on a tear and finished number 3 in the country in the final rankings at 10-3 after they won the Rose Bowl. But they were not a participant in the college football playoff because they had lost 3 games. And we could cite all sorts of examples. Therefore, and I don't know the answer to this, and maybe there isn't an answer. Are we selecting the best teams on December 5th, or are we selecting and rewarding for the best teams throughout the course of the season?
Yeah.
If we are going to go with the hottest teams or the best teams at that moment, then we really need to come up with a metric that weights the wins based on the proximity of games, the recency bias of the games being played.
Yeah, it would be tough to do, but the idealistic part of me thinks that there's a way it can be done. But that's enough with my philosophical questions. I just had 2 quick comments and wanted your thoughts. I'm really concerned about Alabama, and one of the things I'm really focused on is Jalen Milroe. Now, I've said in the past I think Ty Simpson should start. I don't think Milroe's a QB. But what I consistently hear on some of the Alabama shows is that the DeBoer would lose the locker room if he benched Milroe. Now, I may be an old school guy. I don't care one bit what the players think and what the locker room thinks. A coach is a coach, and a coach is supposed to be a leader. And when a coach makes decisions based on losing the locker room, it suggests to me you're losing the team. Do you think Kalen DeBoer should, how does a coach approach that? Do you have to say, look, this is the reality of it? Or do you say, hey, I'm going to give Ty Simpson a shot, and if these players don't like it, they can go take a hike? What's the best approach in a situation like that for a leader?
I would argue that if you are to be respected as a leader, that as long as you are giving the players some ability to vocalize their thoughts and feelings, you are giving them respect that is earned, not just given respect. I don't believe in giving respect to people. Yes, the person walking across the street that I see for the first time, of course, I'm going to give them a modicum of respect just the first time I meet them, and just assume some level of respect. But if I'm going to have a relationship with a person, they're going to have to earn respect. You just don't give respect. So the respect has to be earned. So as long as the players are doing their jobs, they're showing up, they're lifting the weights, they're working hard in practice, as long as you are respecting their effort and their teamwork and their loyalty to the program and putting in the work, that I believe you actually would, in the long run, lose respect by showing them that they are impressing upon you who to play and who not to play. That you're going to lose, in a sense, the flip is that you would lose the locker room out of disrespect for you, that you are showing that they are running the locker room and dictating to you who to play, that they would have far more respect. They may not like it in the short term, but over the long term would have more respect for the coach that says, I'm hearing you, I'm taking you under consideration, I listen to you. However, I'm in charge. You have a role on this team. My role is to make the decisions, and to run the team and determine personnel. And this is my decision.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I agree. My last point concerns Michigan football, or just football generally. So Michigan's, I think, has an issue with Sharon as the head coach, and I might be the first one who says this, and people might think I'm crazy, but I think the next great coach might be Jimmy Rogers from South Dakota State, 2003 FCS Coach of the Year, led South Dakota State to a 15-0 record. My question for you is, do you think it's too big of a jump for a head coach, no matter what their success at the FCS level, to make the jump to a Michigan or, say, I don't know, an Ohio State and be successful?
Usually when I'm asked questions like this, I use whatever knowledge I have of organizations and leadership and so forth, but I also look at history. I try to assess history and think, okay, can we take from examples from the past and simply apply them, or at least put them into context to say, okay, this is similar, but in these ways it's different. So how many times has this worked? How many times has this not worked?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut
We've
you
got
off.
Chris Kleiman at Kansas State. He came from that level of play, and he's now at Kansas State. Now, Kansas State's not Michigan, but they still play in a major conference and try to compete for at least conference championships. That one comes to mind.
Yeah, and I think of DeBoer coming from Sioux Falls to Fresno, then to Washington, and
Yeah, he
then
only had basically a one-season stop at Fresno State, so it
yeah.
was a pretty direct run to Washington. Yep.
And I thought Saban from Toledo to Michigan State, in '98, he pulls the upset in Columbus, I was actually at Ohio State at the time. That was a shocker. But I just wonder if it's too much of a risk. But I think he's got a lot of promise. But I don't want to take up too much of your time. Always great talking to you. Thanks for the good discussion, Mark.
Thanks, Adam. And before we let you go, your Rutgers show, we want to make sure that everyone knows where and when to find it.
Sure. The Rutgers show will be live after the USC game. I'm on East Coast time, but I don't care. Whatever time it is, we will be live.
Oh, wow.
So,
I'm impressed.
It's going to be a great show.
Well,
thanks.
All right. And then you do the weekly show on Monday, correct?
On Monday at 7 p.m., our weekly show. Yes.
Excellent. Awesome.
Thanks
you,
a lot.
Adam.
All right. Have a good one.
Yeah, folks. So again, we've got Adam doing the Rutgers channel, does a remarkable job, as you can hear on these call-in shows. He comes prepared. He's a thinker, and it's much outside the box in a thoughtful way, not a crazy, but a calculated way. And so join Adam for the Rutgers show, Rutgers Live. That's over on the Rutgers channel. That's at 7 p.m. Eastern time on Mondays, and after the Rutgers games with the post-game show. So here, just in the last week or so, in the last few weeks, there we go. Hummus Hero, thank you for that. Jim Tressel. Oh, there's a good example right there. That one worked out rather well. The guy went to 10 BCS bowl games in 11 seasons, 2001 through 10. That's 10 seasons, 9 BCS bowl games in 10 years. No, that's not right, because they went to the Outback Bowl his first season, and they went to the Alamo Bowl. Anyway, it was a heck of a run for Jim Tressel. And if you look up his record is actually better than the knuckleheads who post the record because of this stupid NCAA violations. He went 7-5, 14-0, 11-2, 8-4, 10-2, 12-1, 11-2, 10-3, 11-2, 12-1. All right. Won a national championship, won 3 Fiesta Bowls, won a Rose Bowl, Sugar Bowl. Yeah. One of the greatest coaches of all time. Thank you for that, Hummus Hero. All right. Yes, we will get back together on Friday night, typically a post-game show, but let's do a pregame show since the games are so late. So we will see you on Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern time. And then also join myself and Leanne Herring for the Ole Miss Live show. That's Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern time, right here at the Voice of College Football. Great to have you here. Enjoy Friday, and we'll be back here prior to Penn, USC and Rutgers, and Boise State and UNLV on Friday night.